adoption of AI in healthcare, maybe in drug discovery, is a little more on the back foot as compared to any other industry. And one opinion that did come to me is when we're talking about drug discovery or healthcare, it is a question of life and death at the end of the day. And transparency of AI models is one of the biggest things that we have to work on. And one of the reasons why it was not adopted as early on was probably because AI was such a black box, especially to the end users. So how much of that have you faced, especially as a VC?
I think, I'll speak from the Indian perspective, of course, because the US perspective is very different. In India, most of the VCs, and because you specifically mentioned VCs, don't come, is that all? Yeah, don't come from a science background. So I don't think you'll find like not even a handful, right? Like not even on a fingertip. So most VCs are either finance-driven folks, so they do not look at deep science. They will shy away from investing in something which they don't understand, right? So that will be the number one step. Why? First, I think your question was, why do we not see too many? And I'm probably covering, more than the adoption. I think there would be adoption, but you would not get funded because if they don't understand, they cannot scale that business, right? So I will scale, I will invest, and I mean by the larger community, into something which is a software-based, something which is easily scalable, something which is faster, because as we see, your turnaround time is 4 to 5 years maximum, or maybe even 3 to 4 years. You want to put in your money, quickly exit, and what would that be? That wouldn't be drug discovery. That would be something which is more tried and tested, practical kind of model. But the newer generation of VCs, which are more science-driven, and I think VCs which are coming from outside as well, are interested in focusing on science, want more science-based, because it is also high risk, high return. Low risk, low return is the general mantra, and if it's high risk, there's higher chances of higher return, but there could be odds of, maybe out of 20 of your investments, maybe none of them will work, but one of them could work, right? And that could cover basically your rest of your 19 investments. So I think the answer to that is, I think the ecosystem here. But then I think some of the bigger firms, folks like Cipla, folks like Serum Institute, I think all Bharat Biotech have invested in science, and you see them making a lot of difference. I think folks from outside India as well are now looking up towards India to do some of these science-driven investments. And definitely India is a growing geography, growing economy. This is a place to really invest and grow. And I'm assuming hopefully that folks like Bristol Myers as well would have also started looking India as a potential geography which is growing to grow. I do know that you did have a presence in Bangalore, and then maybe this is a subsequent +1 of that. I'm hoping more MNCs would also come in, but having said that, Indian firms are really growing big, and there is increased focus with deep pockets of some of the Indian pharmaceutical companies, or some of the other medical devices is still growing, but pharmaceutical firm, this is the pharma capital of the world. So I have no doubt that this is for healthcare. This is definitely a geography to grow, and Hyderabad being really the pharma capital of India as well, this is something to look forward to. We may be building solutions for outside of India. For India, I think, at least from investment perspective, it's a bit slower. We do have a lot of diabetes disease management platforms, not like the Inulit kind of thing, but I think because India is also the diabetes capital of the world, I think a lot of these platforms are about disease management, and I think Abbott Libre and some of those devices on a continuous basis, being able to detect your insulin as well, or and then telling how much of your sugar, insulin needs to be pumped in, and along with your diet as well, right? I think because monetization will happen from the diet management part of it. So I'm speaking again from the business model. So I think as we want to see how all these comes together.
Just had one point of view, I guess. When we all talk about explainable AI, again, it is our responsibility also to be a little more cautious about that, right? So a decision that a human makes, how explainable is that? Right? Meaning, let us also have some sort of, I guess, realistic expectations from machines. We've come to a stage where we are saying, oh, a machine has to explain everything. If the machine was supposed to be explaining, if the machine was supposed to be explaining everything, the human could have done it, right? But there is a specific reason why we're going to machines to get some of our decisions speed tracked, but that's not to say that it needs to be a black box. It's absolutely critical to understand what sort of an algorithm is there. More than the algorithm, I guess it's about what sort of a data was used to build that algorithm, right? That gives us a lot of comfort. So you know, when you go to a doctor, typically what do you say? So she or he has already looked at this disease and she's been in business for the last 20 years. She's been treating patients with this condition. She's actually looked at somebody who's got this combination of diseases and she's been able to make a good recovery for that patient. So even in the machine learning space, AI space, I think we should stop getting obsessed about the technology. What is this transformer layer? How many, did we use ReLU? Did we use something else? What embeddings did we use? That's for the scientists to figure out. They will do that. But from a business perspective and from an explainability perspective, I think it is good to have openness. It is good to state exactly what your model is and what it is doing, what are the series of steps. But it is equally important to be open about the data that was used for training and what sorts of, how would I say it, some sort of a workflow steps that you would take if the algorithm doesn't make the decision, right? That's also extremely critical. So there is nothing like 100% accuracy. So what do you do when it is 80% accurate? So are you okay with 2 out of 10 diagnoses being wrong or 2 out of 10 clinical whatever tests going wrong? You're not going to be okay with it, right? So you have to have certain mechanism to address that as well. So explainability is a little wider than explainability just at an architecture for the machine learning model level. This is a favorite topic, so you have to excuse me.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, we asked a question from our end to design a patient cohort for prenatal diabetes, and this probably connects the 2 questions I asked. It actually came up with a cohort, 0 women in that.
Yeah.
So who's going to tell ChatGPT that men don't get pregnant? So yeah, it is about not just the architecture, it's about the data, it's about explaining the entire thing.
Absolutely. And again, that brings us that actually tells me there's something else that's extremely critical. Right? So we're talking about lack of data. Generative AI, by definition, generates stuff. So why not use it for generating synthetic data? In fact, Zastra platform that Sai is extremely fond of, we have an in-house platform that we use for doing annotation, labeling for data sets. We are actually looking at expanding that platform into using generative AI for synthetic data generation. We all know that GANs have existed for a while, right? So this is just an extension. So why can't we use generative AI for that? And maybe humans are going to be at some point in time responsible only for generating data, and we should get paid for it. So all of us have to remember that we should get paid for all the data that we give. Sorry, you had a question, ma'am.
Yeah, I'm taking it from health to mental health. And if you really look at it, mental health is the space where there is a lot of speech to text and text to speech work that we can do. And globally, if you look at it, when you look at therapeutics, there's very little work other than, I don't know, which ChatGPT will bring up a little more, because then you don't need therapists, you probably need only the computer to generate it. But I still feel that if you really look at it, we depend a lot on the Western models of intervention. Whereas if you really look as a practitioner, there are very innate practices that are there and which are like in the West you said you need 12 sessions. Probably in India I'm telling you that 6 sessions, actually people are okay with 6 sessions. One is the payment cost, but also in terms of as therapists we are feeling that people improve faster given the social connects that they have. And so my question here is that, can you throw some light on what is happening in the West in the space of speech to text in the space of mental health?
One which I really found interesting and was from the West was basically, first you get diagnosis, right? And because of COVID, the access to a lot of the psychologists were missing. So would the doctor would first refer to a drug, which is, extreme case, don't want to do that. So are there other interventions which can be brought in? And this was a gamification model for basically addressing mental health as a first step, as a first therapy before they would be put on on any access to psychologists, right? So that was an interesting one where gamification is being used for a lot of mental health issues. Of course, you can determine as well. I think people who are on a lot of social media, Facebook. There was an article a while back that Facebook basically knows much before even the person knows that they are going through depression, right? Because the kind of articles you are clicking on and things like that. So mental health, things like that I think there are different ways of addressing it. I think the interesting thing about this startup was also how they had access to the insurance. I think insurance is a big black box in even in India, right? Like how is the billing done? Is there error in billing? I think billing errors are another big AIML ways of solving things. But I think insurance is another space which is being addressed from the startup space. Both, I think, big in US because that's a big, that's where the majority of the healthcare costs are being escalated. And then I think India, the way we are seeing, a decade back, how the billing was being done was more ad hoc. But now they are, I think we are following more of Western models, which is escalating our healthcare costs as well. I think this is a space definitely to watch out even in our country, especially the insurance space, how that's also escalating our healthcare. Unnecessary procedures, or it could be even wrong billing, right? Like you're being billed extra for things. So it's when you go into the hospital, you don't know how much you're going to pay. I think that's true everywhere now.
So there is a question, I think that can be relatable to Dr. Neeta as well as Vani. So is there any ecosystem where all the pharma companies are sharing some kind of clinical data, masking few of the crucial informations, might be they're not revealing and they are onto their privacy policy, but is there an ecosystem where every companies are coming forward, mainly the big companies, big pharma companies, they're coming forward, they're submitting their data without hampering, or the trials which have been completed, the drugs which are already in the generic forms. And if those clinical trials are being submitted in a platform, that can be shareable to everyone, that can be open to everyone. So if we can apply some kind of statistics, some kind of AI, ML over those data, so that can bring up a lot of revolution. Because that will save a kind of spending over the failed clinical trials, over the budding startups, over the budding companies, budding technologies. So that can be a very drastic thing. And I'm from data analytics company. So I have seen many companies who are our clients. So they are very uncomfortable in revealing what they are doing. So that is, I think it's very common in healthcare, in pharma. But there should be some kind of common platform that will give a AI and ML to the next level. And that can be easily adaptable also. There should be some boundary, defined boundary, but it is required. What's your opinion? Because that is both the ways. That will lead to help to the new startups as well, and that will also help to the pharma companies in avoiding few of the spending which is not required.
Answer that I'm not aware of any such consortium where all the data is coming together. But then I think you just started a startup. So, that's how startups start, because you have an idea and it is a good idea. So I think it's like, how do you promote it and, find a cause for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or not.
And I think this is where the consortiums come together, no? Because there is some level of non-confidential things that people can share together. But, and then, of course, there is some confidential.
So I think it is important to kind of bring it together to create that vision of saying, hey, this is important to do. So yeah, it is a task. Consortiums made, but for diseases like malaria and things like that, right? So something which is not core, like neuroscience or cancer biology, because every firm is competing against each other. And having said that, none of the major pharmaceutical companies have come up with drugs from scratch from their own labs, right? They've all been acquired by some of the startups. So that's where the power of startups comes in, that you do your discovery, you go now that data is out there and you are able to crawl all that data with the ChatGPTs or the LLMs of the world, go look at the clinical data. Can you make sense out of that, right? I think there's an idea right there. Can you go look at the clinical trial data, published clinical trial data, which is published at NIH and all, right? So all those data, can you make, and I'm sure bigger firms are already doing that, can you make, find a drug like failed clinical trials, right? And that's why data from each of those trials is important, because how was Viagra discovered was, some person who was vigilant, can you go look at some of that data and come up with, discovery? And I think that's where, now that everything is exhausted, all the, basically all the drugs in terms of the discovery is being exhausted, can people go back, and that's what some of the big pharma is doing, to go back and look at some of their old clinical trial data and come up with newer forms, newer drugs, or which they didn't know had some of those side effects.
The last number, it's around 38 pharma, biotech, service providers are not fit, they share the data there. There's also Transmart, I think that is at a DB gap, which NIH sort of pushes for researchers, and that's where data is available. But I think to the point of legacy data where large pharma being used for the sort of research you're talking about, there was a challenge within the large pharma also, that the data was very siloed in functions. I think that is also being worked on. There's data 42 by Novartis, for instance. Data 42 is an initiative. So things are changing. I think data is becoming far more available. Now the question is, that's solved, how do you then make use of it? So yeah, that, do talk to me if you want to know more about it.
Maybe there is a world where the patient becomes a custodian of data. So far the pharma companies, the clinical trial companies, the providers, the insurance companies, they have the data. Today you probably have a lot more power. Maybe you build that data. And if you are willing to share your data across different companies, and at some point in time there might be some startup that will provide a digital locker for your clinical trials data that can be shared across pharma companies. You get paid for it, and then you actually make data really, really democratized. Right? So that's probably an area to look for. Again, the drug discovery that they were talking about, right? So there is another aspect to it. No drug obviously gets made from scratch. You're basically running each drug on a whole bunch of symptoms and seeing if it makes sense. So maybe there is an AI algorithm that does that digital twin equivalent, and for all you know, paracetamol might help cure something that you've never thought of. Right? So yeah, there's different spin that you can put on existing data that you've got, including social media data. I've had a project that I worked for quite some time back for Celgene, again a pharma company, and they used social media data to understand what the side effects of some of the drugs that they've released across geographies are. What are they talking about? A lot of people, for example, in India, you don't probably consider headache as a big side effect, right? So you're like, oh yeah, you took a medicine, you're bound to be, dull, yeah, 1 day fever, headache, it's okay. But then somebody in Norway might be very, very upset about something like that. So they actually use social media forums data to try and figure out what people were saying. And I heard it was being used in the mental health as well. Figuring out what the symptoms for medication is. That's a big deal in the mental health space, right? Here you actually know what the symptom is. Has your pain reduced or not? In mental health, how do you figure out whether your depression is reduced or not? You only know it by symptoms, as in if you're not a practitioner like this. And people have discussed openly in forums, and that's a wealth of data that we have.
And that's why I advocate on post-marketing data analysis as a side effect.
There was a study on Alzheimer's wherein it was a group data, and they looked at what were the early symptoms. And in that group, they actually came up and they said that it was not even sadness, because normally we are taught that you see depression before Alzheimer's. This was something like, but it was very, very unique and nice.
So I wanted to also add nowadays, I think there's software as a therapeutic as well. So that's also being put up as like a FDA regulation. So the one company, the mental health one, it was being, they were going to get therapeutic, more as a therapeutic. The gamification was more as a FDA regulated therapeutic. So they were bound by, like that. Is there a progress in, when they play this game? Is there like deterioration? Is it helping? So they had shown clinical trial that it was, the gamification was helping in fighting depression or some sort of mental health.
Yeah, and for all practical purposes, we have government hospitals that are willing to give data, provided some very, very enthusiastic techies go there and digitize that stuff.
Yeah. I just want to make this thing. Earlier, as students, we were taught like how the patient is walking up and how she's looking at us, how the patient's symptoms are evolved. By then, we were taught how to diagnose a disease. Now all that is missing. Now it's all machine-based. Now it is all computerized. Now it's all algorithm-based and all. That human touch, which is missing. Actually, we were as a student.
I'm saying I see a big benefit in AI for that, because the very fact that the way you respond itself, you can pick up an AI. Because if you're being compassionate, your body language, the words that
so
you're
many
using.
diseases are diagnosed.
Yeah.
Thyroid and all, the voice you make, the gait which you are like working in, you're talking about the neuromuscular disorders, or the simple things like the brain and all. They're all diagnosed just by looking. Our teachers used to teach us, like just by looking at the patient or the way he's expressing himself, or the majority of the diseases, even the
Fractures and
everything was diagnosed.
Or even the color of his skin, right? Like
And
the color of the skin,
your
like if you look
pigmentation
pale,
and the nodules, the diagnosis is already there. You need not run so much of so many diagnoses.
So there was a study in Lancet that I think 90% or even more
That is the reason
the new graduating doctors both across the world are not able to now use the old form of blood pressure machine, the mercury based.
Of course, we were taught how to touch and then feel the pulse. So now it's all machine.
All digital. So I think the whole part of being able to perceive things is missing. Everything is digitized. So I think that human element is also.
The human element is missing.
It cannot be replaced. Because when we were talking, because after EMRs came, like when you go to see a doctor, the doctor just looks at you for 2 seconds.
He's more bothered about filling it.
And he's filling it in. And he's like, keep talking.
Keep talking, and then we digitize and do
such a
something
difference
else.
between government hospital and private hospital. I've been in both. In government hospitals, still there is a personal touch.
There's a personal touch. Like we look at the patient as a patient, not as a machine
You
or
go
a
to a
resource.
private medical college, you see a different world.
especially in Western and all, as Madam said, that they don't look at the patient. And if you have to wait even for acute appendicitis, it's an emergency. You have to wait till your machine decides what is happening. And these antenatals, when you're talking about, and it's a big lot of a hole there. You don't get your appointment. That's an acute case. You need to address the symptom. And here, the doctor, if you come and patient is very happy, she feels that ownership of the patient, and then she diagnoses, and it's with one talk, everything is good. That touch is still there, over here.
Sorry, I will do one more question and then we can continue the discussion. There's some snacks. That would be a good combination, I think. So I just let her ask.
So I just wanted to add some thing to what ma'am was telling about mental health. So I worked on a project which was on mental health, and what we were trying to do there was using passive sensors to identify whether a person is under depression or not in a clinical study where we had diabetes patients who were under the study. So in diabetes type 2 patients, the rate of depression is high. So we took that as a clinical study data, and we handed over their phones, the sensor phones, which they were having a day-to-day life. And what we found was there was a high correlation between the difference in the person's communication or the number of calls he made. The entropy of it was very high when he starts talking to somebody for a longer time. So that is a sign of that he is going into depression. So that was very highly noticed. So what we came up with was a AI-powered chatbot, which is called Visa. It's currently in live, and it has been used in a lot of, even I think during COVID, it was the only bot which was allowed to be used in the whole world as well. So what this does is, from the AI flag that this person is not using his phone as usually he does, it triggers a chat to the person. So, are you doing good? Are you doing well? What was your day? So this is like it's not like acting like a doctor there, but it is just intervening to ask whether this person is doing well or not. And this is again, there is other, the direct physicians who are collaborating with this chatbot or the university. They go in for detailed study of this patient if they want it. So this is something where the mental health thing, and this was studied in India. The study underwent in India. Yeah, and it is now West. Yeah, now they have released it in UK.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to share this.
It's actually happened.
You also have to be given a person.
I do not think that there is a clear division of men and women.
No bias.
So there is a big data bias happening here. All the women are asking questions, so I'll take one option. So this is for Dr. Neeta. So whenever there is a general purpose technologies, right, comes into the world, like steam engines, printouts, electricity, there is a huge revolution, right? For example, there is a huge change in the economy, the social living of everyone changes, right? So now again, we are in the world where generative AI is taking again. So this is again a GPT, right? A general purpose technology. I'm not talking about generative pre-trained transformer. So when we see this new world, as a venture capitalist, everybody, whenever there is a GPT coming in, there is an initial thrust, right? People start experimenting themselves, trying to do new things. As a venture capitalist, how do you see this? And is it just the initial thrust where people are trying to implement new things, experiment things, trying to come up with something? But there is a huge difference between steam engine and an electric engine, right? So there is a huge time gap where people really experimented and come up with a real solution, right? So how do you see this new trend in people trying and experimenting a lot of things?
So, I think I'm going to go with, Vani's example of she went to one of the conferences and every second startup was a AI startup, right? So AI was the buzzword. And the minute, I think AI was used as a buzzword to get the valuation higher, but we also know that that's a buzzword, right? And going back to your original question about ChatGPT, is it something which we're looking out for? I think we all have to understand that, we're not looking for tools for solving the problem. What we're trying to see is what is the problem that you're trying to solve? It's not the tools, right? Will you come with the answer to make this bottle? I want water, right? Whether it's a plastic bottle or a glass bottle, I think that's the difference. I want water. So what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Is it these tools are making it solve it faster, cheaper? Then yes, I'm interested in understanding that. But otherwise, I want to know what is the problem that you're trying to solve. You can throw all those words at me, you can throw AI, ChatGPT, it doesn't matter. I want to understand, first of all, whether the person knows how to use it, what sort of team, what is the main, number one would be the problem that you're trying to solve, right? Who's the team? What's the monetization model? The tools comes like towards the later, right? Like when I know that, okay, the team can deliver, what are the tools? Is this faster? Is it making cheaper? Things like that. But otherwise, ChatGPT, conversational AI, these are, good words, but I want to know what's the problem that you're trying to solve.
So as we come to the end of today's session, we would like to extend heartfelt gratitude to the speakers for sharing their perspectives and helping us broaden their thought process on the art of possible in the world of AI-enabled healthcare. As a token of appreciation, we would now like to hand over a small memento to our speaker. So, requesting Urmila ma'am, Vice President of Corporate Service, to hand over the memento to Dr. Jayalata. Ma'am, please. Now, I would request Nanda Padmaraju, President of our Rest of the World Business, to hand over the memento to Vani. SVP Talent Development, to hand over the memento to Dr. Neeti. So with that, we conclude today's session, and we invite you to continue the conversation over high tea and connect with the speakers as well as Cigniti team for a free willing chat.